A journey into the gray. Have you ever found yourself caught between two choices, where neither felt entirely right? A space where the rules of the world seem to conflict with the compass in your own heart? We live our lives in this space, in the countless shades of gray between the black and white of absolute justice and absolute morality. Tonight, we are not here to find answers. We are here to ask the questions. We will embark on a quiet journey through 50 moral dilemmas, from the ancient puzzles that have haunted philosophers for centuries to the complex ethical challenges of our modern world. This is not a lecture nor a guide. It is an invitation to wander through the intricate corridors of the human conscience. Each dilemma is a story, a thought experiment, designed to gently occupy your mind. There is no right or wrong path here, only pathways to explore. So, find a comfortable position, let the world outside fade away, and allow your mind to drift with us. Our journey into the gray begins now.
The crossroads where justice and rightness meet. Imagine a vast, ancient library, stretching infinitely in all directions. In one wing, every book is bound in the same stern leather cover. The pages are crisp, the text printed in uniform, unwavering black ink. This is the wing of justice. Here, the rules are codified, the laws are absolute, and the consequences are clearly defined. It is a system built by society to maintain order, a framework designed to be impartial and consistent. Justice in this library is about balance, about ensuring that actions have predictable and fair consequences for everyone, regardless of circumstance. It is the communal agreement on how we should behave to coexist peacefully. It is the law that states stealing is a crime, that contracts must be honored, and that harm done to another must be met with a penalty. It is, in essence, the world's shared rulebook. Now, imagine walking to a different wing of this endless library. Here the books are all unique. Some are small, worn diaries with handwritten scrawls. Others are grand, colorful volumes filled with stories and art. This is the wing of rightness, or morality. Unlike justice, which is external and communal, rightness is internal and deeply personal. It is the compass within each of us, guided by empathy, compassion, experience, and intuition. Your book of rightness is different from mine, and mine is different from your neighbor's. It is what tells us to help a stranger who has fallen, to speak a kind word to someone in pain, or to feel a pang of guilt when we betray a trust, even if no law was broken. It's the whisper that asks, not is it legal, but is it good? Is it kind? Is it compassionate? For much of our lives, the paths of justice and rightness run parallel. The law says we should not harm others, and our inner compass agrees. Justice demands we keep our promises, and our sense of integrity tells us that is the right thing to do. In these moments, the world feels simple. The choice is clear. But the most profound dilemmas of human existence arise when these two paths diverge, creating a crossroads where we are forced to choose. This is the fundamental tension that will underpin our entire journey tonight. The conflict between the rules we have all agreed to follow and the personal, often silent code written in our own hearts. This leads us to the very heart of our next dilemma. What happens when the written law, the great book of justice, directly contradicts the whispers of our own conscience? We are now standing before the echo in your heart versus the letter of the law.
The echo in your heart versus the letter of the law. We bring the conflict from our conceptual library into a moment of decision where your own two hands must make a choice. This is the dilemma of your inner conscience versus the established law. The law is a stone tablet carved by society for all to see. It is rigid, clear, and designed to stand the test of time. Your conscience, however, is a flowing river. It is fluid, personal, and shifts with the landscape of empathy, experience, and the specific situation before you. Imagine you are living in a country with an oppressive regime. A new law is passed that declares any citizen found harboring a political dissident must be arrested and severely punished. The law is unambiguous. One night, during a storm, there is a knock at your door. A family, exhausted and terrified, stands on your doorstep begging you for a place to hide. In this moment, the stone tablet of the law and the flowing river of your conscience are in direct opposition. The law demands one thing: you must turn them away. To help them is to become a criminal yourself, risking your safety and your family's well-being. It is the logical, orderly, and safe choice. But then, you feel the pull of the river. Your conscience whispers a different truth. You see the fear in their eyes. Your heart tells you that protecting the innocent is a moral imperative that transcends any man-made decree. It argues that the law itself is unjust and therefore has no moral authority. To follow your conscience is to affirm your own humanity. Figures throughout history who are celebrated as heroes for this very act were all criminals in their time, breaking the letter of the law to uphold what they felt was a higher moral law. This choice forces us to ask terrifying questions. Is it our duty to be a good citizen or a good person? And what happens when those two things are not the same? This internal conflict, this battle between external rules and our internal moral intuition, forces us to confront an even more immediate and terrifying question. What if the choice isn't between breaking a law to save someone, but between which lives to save when the rules of the world have already failed? This brings us to the cold steel tracks of a classic and haunting puzzle, the trolley problem.
The cold logic of the tracks, the trolley problem. Picture this in your mind's eye. You are standing beside a set of train tracks. In the distance, you see a trolley car, its wheels screeching as it barrels forward, completely out of control. Ahead of the trolley, on the main track, you see 5 people tied up and unable to move. The trolley is headed straight for them, and a collision is certain. However, you are standing next to a lever. If you pull this lever, you can switch the trolley to a different track. But there is a problem. On this side track, there is one person, also tied up. You have 2 choices, and only seconds to decide. You can do nothing, and the trolley will continue on its path, resulting in the death of the 5 people. Or you can pull the lever, diverting the trolley and saving the 5. But in doing so, you will be actively responsible for the death of the one person on the sidetrack. This is the trolley problem in its purest form, a dilemma that strips away emotion and context to reveal a raw clash of ethical principles. On one hand, there is the utilitarian argument. The best action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. From this perspective, pulling the lever is the logical and moral choice. The math is simple. 1 life lost is better than 5. You have the power to minimize the tragedy, and therefore you have a duty to do so. On the other hand, there is the deontological perspective, which argues that certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of their consequences. From this viewpoint, pulling the lever means you are choosing to kill someone. You are actively participating in their death. If you do nothing, the 5 people may die, but their deaths are the result of the runaway trolley, not your direct action. By pulling the lever, you cross a moral line from being a bystander to a tragedy to becoming its agent. There is no clean answer here. Is it better to allow a greater harm to occur through inaction, or to cause a lesser harm through direct action? This puzzle reveals how our moral intuition can be deeply conflicted, torn between cold logic and the profound weight of personal responsibility. But what happens when the choice isn't about life and death, but about the smaller, everyday collisions between truth and compassion? Let's step away from the tracks and consider the kindness of a lie.
The kindness of a lie, when truth and compassion collide. We now move from the dramatic and deadly to the quiet and personal, a dilemma that we have all faced in some form. Imagine a close friend, someone you care about deeply, has spent months working on a creative project, perhaps a painting, a novel, or a piece of music. They are incredibly proud of their work and see it as the culmination of their passion and effort. They come to you, their eyes shining with excitement and vulnerability, and ask for your honest opinion. As you look at their work, your heart sinks. To you, it is clearly flawed. The painting is amateurish, the novel is cliché, the music is uninspired. At this moment, you stand at a crossroads between two deeply held virtues, honesty and kindness. The path of honesty demands that you tell the truth. You believe that truth, even when it is difficult, is essential for growth. A true friend, you might argue, provides constructive criticism to help the other person improve. Lying, even by omission, is a form of disrespect. It treats your friend as someone too fragile to handle reality and denies them the feedback they need to truly succeed in the long run. To tell the truth is to honor their potential and the integrity of your relationship. But the path of kindness and compassion calls to you with equal force. You see the joy and pride in your friend's face. You know how much this project means to them. A harsh truth at this moment could crush their spirit, extinguishing a creative spark that brings them happiness. Is this the right time for brutal honesty? Kindness suggests that supporting your friend's emotional well-being is the more important duty. A white lie, a simple, "It's wonderful, you should be so proud," is a small price to pay to protect their feelings and encourage their passion. This dilemma forces us to question the absolute value of truth. Is honesty always the best policy, or are there times when compassion should override it? It's a choice between causing potential long-term benefit through short-term pain or providing immediate comfort at the cost of complete sincerity. It's a subtle but powerful conflict. This exploration of a harmless deception, a wrong act for what seems like a right reason, sets the stage for a dilemma where the stakes are significantly higher. We now turn to a situation where a wrongful act isn't meant to spare feelings, but to ensure survival. The story of a loaf of bread and a hungry child.
A loaf of bread, a hungry child, the morality of need. Let us consider a scenario that is as old as civilization itself. A parent finds themselves in a desperate situation. Their young child has not eaten for days and is weak with hunger. The parent has no money, no job, and has exhausted every option for help. Every door has been closed to them. As they walk through a market, they see a stall piled high with fresh bread. The baker is distracted, and the parent knows they could easily slip a loaf under their coat without being seen. In this moment, two fundamental principles of society are in direct conflict: the right to property and the right to life. From the perspective of justice and the law, the answer is clear. Stealing is wrong. The baker has a right to their property, earned through their own labor. If we allow one person to steal out of need, we create a precedent that could undermine the very fabric of social order and commerce. The law must be applied equally to everyone, regardless of their circumstances, to ensure fairness and predictability. To uphold the law is to uphold the structure that allows society to function. However, from the perspective of morality and human need, the situation looks entirely different. The parent is not stealing out of greed or malice, but out of a desperate, primal need to save their child's life. The moral compass within might scream that the life of a child is infinitely more valuable than a loaf of bread. It might ask if a society's laws of property are truly just if they lead to a child starving. Is it a greater wrong to steal a piece of food or to stand by and let a child suffer from hunger? This is the core of the Heinz dilemma, a famous puzzle in which a man must choose whether to steal a drug to save his dying life. Here, the choice is more fundamental: food for a child. This dilemma forces us to confront the limits of our legal systems and ask whether our rules account for the desperation of the human condition. It questions whether justice can truly be blind, or if it must sometimes peek from under its blindfold to see the profound human suffering that drives people to break the rules. The parent's choice is a heavy one, And it leads us directly to our next question. When a wrong has been committed, what is the purpose of what comes next? Is it revenge or is it justice?
The weight of punishment, a scale for revenge or restoration. Our last dilemma left a parent holding a stolen loaf of bread, an act of illegality born from the rightness of love. Now let us assume they are caught. The question of guilt is simple, but the question of consequence is one of the deepest puzzles of justice. What is the purpose of punishment? On one side of the scale, we place retribution. This is the oldest, most instinctual form of justice, often summarized as an eye for an eye. Retributive justice argues that a crime creates an imbalance in society, and punishment is the act of restoring that balance. The offender must pay a debt, and the severity of the punishment should be directly proportional to the severity of the crime. It is backward-looking, focused entirely on the wrongful act that was committed. It serves a deep-seated human need to see a wrong met with a consequence, to feel that the offender has gotten what they deserved. It sends a clear message that rules have meaning and breaking them has a cost. For the baker who was stolen from, this might be the most satisfying outcome. But on the other side of the scale, we place a different weight: restoration or rehabilitation. This philosophy of justice is forward-looking. It is less concerned with punishing the past act and more concerned with building a better future. It asks not what does the offender deserve, but rather what needs to be done to repair the harm and prevent this from happening again. In the case of our parent, restorative justice wouldn't focus on a prison cell. Instead, it might involve a process where the parent apologizes to the baker, works to pay back the cost of the bread, and most importantly, is connected with social services that can provide food and employment. The goal is not to make the offender suffer, but to heal the victim, the community, and the offender themselves. Here lies the dilemma. Retributive justice feels fair and equal, but it can create a cycle of punishment that does little to solve the root cause of the crime. Restorative justice is compassionate and pragmatic, but it can be seen as soft on crime, failing to provide the sense of righteous closure that victims in society often crave. We are forced to decide what we truly want from our justice system: satisfaction for the past or safety for the future. This very question about what is truly fair leads us to our next great puzzle.
The puzzle of equality, treating everyone the same versus giving everyone what they need. The debate over punishment forces us to define what is fair, and this word fair is more complex than it appears, often caught in a tug of war between two powerful ideas: equality and equity. To understand the difference, picture three people of different heights trying to watch a parade over a tall wooden fence. The principle of equality would give each person the exact same sized box to stand on. This seems fair at first glance. Everyone is treated identically. But the result is not fair at all. The tall person who didn't need a box can now see even more easily. The person of average height can now just barely see over the fence, and the shortest person, even with the box, still can't see anything. They were treated equally, but they did not receive an equal opportunity. Now let's apply the principle of equity, which is another word for fairness. Instead of giving everyone the same box, we give each person what they need to achieve the same outcome. The tall person gets no box. The average person gets one box. The short person gets two boxes. Now all three can see the parade. The treatment was unequal, but the outcome is one of true fairness. This is the dilemma. In our societies, we strive for equality, often enshrining it in our laws. We want equal pay for equal work, equal access to education, and equal treatment under the law. But people do not start from the same place. Some are born into wealth and privilege with every advantage, like the tall person who already sees over the fence. Others are born into poverty or face systemic barriers, like the short person who needs more help to even get a glimpse. So, what is more just? A system based on pure equality, which treats everyone the same and lets the results fall where they may,
or a system based on equity, which actively gives more resources and support to those who start with less in an effort to level the playing field. Those who champion equality might argue that equity is a form of unfair social engineering, penalizing some for their advantages. Those who champion equity might argue that equality is a hollow promise in a world that is already fundamentally unequal. The puzzle is deciding whether true justice lies in the sameness of the treatment or the fairness of the outcome. This dilemma intensifies when we move from broad societal structures to rigid hierarchies, where rules are not just guidelines, but direct commands. The shadow of a uniform. Is following orders always right? We've examined the conflict between a personal conscience and a written law. Now, let's narrow the focus to a more intense scenario, where the law comes not from a distant government, but from the voice of a direct superior. This is the dilemma of obedience, of just following orders. Hierarchical structures like the military, law enforcement, and even corporations are built on this principle. Obedience creates efficiency, discipline, and unity of action. A soldier in the heat of battle cannot stop to debate the morality of every command. They must trust the judgment of their commanding officer for the mission to succeed. In this view, moral responsibility flows upwards. The person who gives the order bears the weight of its consequences, while the person who carries it out is merely an instrument of a larger wheel. This provides a sense of order and psychological safety. It allows individuals to perform difficult, sometimes terrible tasks by deferring the moral judgment to the authority figure. However, the 20th century provided a devastating counterargument to this idea. The Nuremberg trials, which prosecuted Nazi leaders after World War II, established a revolutionary principle in international law. An individual is still responsible for their actions, even if they were following the orders of a superior. The defense of, "I was just following orders," was rejected. This established the idea that there is a higher, universal moral law, a law of humanity, that no command can override. It means that your conscience is your own, and you cannot outsource its authority to someone else, regardless of their rank or title. This is the core of the dilemma. Imagine the young police officer ordered by their sergeant to use excessive force on peaceful protesters, or an engineer told by their manager to approve a product they know has a dangerous flaw. To disobey is to risk their career, to be labeled insubordinate, to betray the trust of their team. To obey is to violate their own internal sense of right and wrong, and to become complicit in causing harm. Does the uniform they wear or the position they hold absolve them of their moral choice? Is the true crime the giving of the unjust order, or the act of carrying it out? The Nuremberg principle suggests that our ultimate allegiance must be to our own conscience, but in the moment of decision, faced with immense pressure, the shadow of a uniform can make that choice feel impossibly heavy. This very idea of a universal moral law raises another profound question. Does justice even look the same no matter where you are in the world? A world of justice, how morality changes with the map. Our exploration so far has largely assumed a shared understanding of what just and right might mean. But what if we challenge that assumption? Let us embark on a brief journey around the world, not with a suitcase, but with a question. Is justice universal? This brings us to the conflict between moral universalism and cultural relativism. Moral universalism is the belief that certain ethical principles are true for all people, in all cultures, at all times. The idea that torture is inherently wrong, that every human has a right to dignity, or that compassion is a virtue, these are seen as universal truths, accessible to anyone through reason and empathy. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a powerful attempt to codify such a system, suggesting a single standard of justice for the entire human family. On the other side is cultural relativism, which argues that morality is not universal, but is instead created by and dependent on culture. In this view, there is no ultimate standard of right and wrong. To judge another culture's practices by your own ethical standards is a form of arrogance.
What is considered a moral imperative in one society may be seen as a grave injustice in another. For example, consider the practice of filial piety in many East Asian cultures, where the duty to care for one's elderly parents is one of the highest moral obligations, sometimes taking precedence over one's own personal ambitions. In many Western cultures, while caring for parents is valued, the emphasis is often on individual autonomy and self-fulfillment. A cultural relativist would say that neither system is inherently better. They are simply different products of different histories and values. The moral universalist might argue that certain individual rights should never be compromised, regardless of cultural tradition. Here is the dilemma. When we encounter a cultural practice that deeply offends our own moral sensibilities, perhaps regarding marriage, punishment, or social roles, what is the just response? Do we condemn it based on our belief in universal human rights, risking cultural imperialism? Or do we accept it as simply different, risking the passive acceptance of what we genuinely believe to be suffering and injustice? This question forces us to look in the mirror and ask whether our own definition of justice is a clear window onto truth or just a reflection of the room we grew up in. So far, all our dilemmas have involved a choice to act. But what about the choice not to act? The silent choice, when doing nothing, is a decision. We have pulled levers, stolen bread, lied to friends, and grappled with the weight of obedience. In every scenario, we have been an active participant, a decider. But now we must confront a more subtle and perhaps more common dilemma, the moral weight of doing nothing. This is often called the bystander effect, a phenomenon tragically illustrated by the famous story of Kitty Genovese, a woman attacked in New York City, while dozens of residents reportedly heard her screams but did not intervene, each assuming someone else would take responsibility. Inaction feels like a neutral position. If you don't participate in the harm, you are not responsible for it. But is that truly the case? Imagine you are scrolling through social media and you come across a post where a group of people are relentlessly bullying an individual. The comments are cruel, personal, and escalating. You are a silent observer in this digital crowd. You can choose to actively defend the person being attacked, but that might draw the bully's attention to you. You can report the post, a small, anonymous act with an uncertain outcome. Or you can do the easiest thing, nothing. You can simply keep scrolling, close the app, and let the moment pass. It wasn't your fight. You didn't start it. But in this situation, is silence truly neutral? For the person being attacked, your silence, combined with the silence of hundreds of other observers, can feel like a form of consent to the abuse. It amplifies their sense of isolation and validates the aggressor's behavior. Your choice not to act, your decision to remain a bystander, has a real consequence. It contributes to the environment in which the harm is allowed to continue. This is the silent choice. It's the decision not to speak up when you hear a coworker make an inappropriate joke. It's the choice to walk past the homeless person without making eye contact. It's the failure to question a decision you know is wrong. This dilemma reveals the uncomfortable truth that in the theater of morality, there are no spectators. We are always on the stage. And when we choose not to say a line, that silence becomes part of the play. It is a choice, and it has a weight all its own. Concluding the first part of our journey into the foundations of justice and morality.
The broken promise made to prevent a tragedy. We ended the first part of our journey with the silent choice of inaction. Now we begin our exploration of everyday ethical conflicts with a very loud, very active choice, the decision to break a sacred vow. A promise is a piece of yourself that you give to another person. It is the bedrock of trust, an invisible contract that binds two souls together. Now, imagine you have made such a promise. A dear friend confides in you, revealing a secret and making you swear you will tell no one. The secret, however, is not a harmless embarrassment. It is a plan that you believe will lead to severe harm. Perhaps they plan to confront a rival in a way that could lead to violence. Or maybe they are exhibiting signs of a deep depression and have hinted at self-harm. You have promised silence. Your word is your bond, and to break it is to commit a profound act of betrayal that will likely shatter the friendship forever. To betray a friend's trust is to violate one of the most fundamental rules of human connection. Yet the weight of what you know is crushing. Keeping the promise means standing by silently while your friend walks toward a cliff's edge. It is an act of loyalty to the person they were when they made you promise, but perhaps a betrayal of the person you have a duty to protect now. To break the promise, to tell a family member, a therapist, or an authority, is to prioritize their well-being over your word. It is an act of intervention that might save them, but from their perspective, it will feel like a stab in the back. This dilemma forces a choice between two different kinds of rightness. Are you being a better friend by honoring your promise of loyalty, or by breaking it out of an act of desperate care? The choice you make defines the very nature of your friendship and your own moral code. This agonizing choice, to betray a trust for a noble reason, stands in stark contrast to our next dilemma, which explores the temptation to betray a trust for a purely selfish one.
The stolen idea, a dilemma of credit and creation. We now move from the intimate sphere of friendship to the competitive arena of the workplace, where ambition and integrity often collide. Imagine you are part of a team, working on a high-stakes project. A junior colleague, quiet and often overlooked, shares an idea with you in confidence. It is a moment of pure genius, an innovative solution that will not only save the project, but will undoubtedly earn whoever presents it a major promotion and the admiration of the entire company. A few days later, you are in a crucial meeting with senior leadership. In a moment of confusion, the CEO turns to you and praises you for that very same brilliant idea, assuming it was yours. In that split second, the world seems to stop. You have a choice. You can immediately correct the record, giving full credit to your junior colleague. This is the path of honesty and justice. It upholds the principle that people deserve recognition for their contributions, but it also means you will get no credit, and you may even look foolish for the misunderstanding. The other path is silence. By simply saying nothing, by accepting the praise with a modest smile, you can claim the idea as your own. The promotion, the respect, the career advancement, it can all be yours. Your colleague is junior and might be too intimidated to challenge the narrative. This dilemma is not about preventing harm, but about seizing an opportunity. It pits your ambition directly against your ethics. Taking the credit is a theft, but it's a theft of something intangible, an idea. There are no alarms, no police, only the quiet judgment of your own conscience. What is the value of an idea? And what is the price of your integrity? The silent choice to accept unearned praise is a profound statement about the kind of person you are. It's a quiet betrayal that benefits you directly. This question of betrayal in professional life leads us to an even more personal conflict, where the lines between loyalty and honesty are drawn within our closest relationships.
The loyalty test, when a friend is wrong. We have seen what happens when a friend's secret threatens their own well-being. Now we face a situation where your friend is the one causing the harm. Friendship is built on an unspoken code of loyalty. It's a promise to stand by each other, to have each other's backs, especially when the world turns against them. But what happens when your friend is unequivocally in the wrong? Imagine you were at a social event and you witness your best friend tell a devastating lie about another person, a lie that could ruin that person's reputation or career. Or perhaps you discover that your friend cheated to win an important competition, an award that meant the world to another competitor who played by the rules. You are the only one who knows the truth. The code of loyalty demands your silence. You are their friend. Your job is to support them, to protect them. You might choose to confront them in private, to express your disapproval, but you would never expose them publicly. To do so would be the ultimate act of treason in a friendship.
On the other hand, your conscience calls for justice. You see the innocent person who has been wronged. Your sense of fairness tells you that the truth should be known, that the cheater should not be rewarded, that the liar should be held accountable. To speak up is to align yourself with honesty and with the victim, but it is also to declare war on your friendship. It will almost certainly be the end of your bond, and you will be seen as a traitor. This dilemma creates a battlefield where friendship and justice are enemy commanders. Does your loyalty to a single person outweigh your duty to the truth? Is the purpose of friendship to enable your friend's worst impulses through silent support, or is it to hold them to a higher standard, even at the cost of the relationship itself? This painful choice about whether to reveal private information for the sake of justice scales up dramatically in our next dilemma.
The glass house, privacy versus safety in a digital world. Our last dilemma involved revealing one person's private wrongdoing. Now we expand that concept to all of society in the defining ethical conflict of our digital age. Imagine your government proposes a new, powerful national security program. This program would involve the use of advanced artificial intelligence to scan every email, text message, and private online communication of every citizen. The goal is to detect patterns of speech and behavior associated with terrorism and other serious crimes, allowing law enforcement to intervene before a tragedy occurs. The government argues that this system will save countless lives and make the country significantly safer. This is the argument for safety. In a world of hidden threats, the ability to find the needle in the haystack is paramount. Proponents would say, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. The surveillance is for the greater good, a small price to pay for a secure society. On the other side of this debate is the fundamental right to privacy. This right is the cornerstone of personal freedom, the right to have private thoughts, to hold private conversations, and to be free from the watchful eye of the state without just cause. Opponents of the program argue that giving the government the power to watch everyone creates a glasshouse society where true freedom of expression withers. It creates a chilling effect where people become afraid to discuss controversial ideas for fear of being misinterpreted by an algorithm. They argue that such a powerful tool could easily be abused, used to silence political dissent or control the population. The dilemma is this: do we willingly sacrifice a measure of our privacy in exchange for the promise of greater safety? Or is privacy an absolute right that cannot be compromised, even in the name of security? There is no easy answer, and where we choose to draw the line defines the very character of the society we live in. This grand societal debate about privacy brings us down to its most common, everyday form.
The Whisper Network, the hidden ethics of gossip. We have just explored the large-scale surveillance of our digital lives. Now, let's shrink the scale to one of the oldest forms of social surveillance: gossip. At first glance, gossip can seem like a trivial, harmless pastime. It is a fundamental part of human interaction, a way we build social bonds, enforce group norms, and simply entertain ourselves. It feels good to be in the know, to share a secret story that solidifies your connection with another person. Imagine you are with a group of friends, and one of them begins to share a personal, slightly embarrassing story about a mutual acquaintance who is not there. The story isn't world-shattering, but it is private. It's about their recent breakup, their struggles at work, or a clumsy mistake they made. You have a choice. You can lean in, listen intently, and maybe even add a detail you know. In doing so, you are participating in a bonding ritual. You are strengthening your ties with the people present. The alternative is to refuse to participate. You can gently change the subject or express discomfort with talking about someone behind their back. This choice might create a moment of social awkwardness. It might brand you as self-righteous or not a team player. You are refusing to participate in the Whisper Network. Herein lies the ethical dilemma. While it can feel harmless, gossip is the act of using someone else's private life as a form of social currency. It trades in information that is not ours to share,
and it can shape a person's reputation without their knowledge or consent. Even if the intent isn't malicious, the act itself is a violation of trust and privacy on a micro scale. Is gossip a harmless social lubricant, essential for navigating our complex social worlds? Or is it a fundamentally unethical act, a small betrayal that erodes trust and treats other people's lives as entertainment? Your decision in that moment, to listen or to turn away, is a quiet vote on what kind of social world you wish to create.
The fork in the road. Helping a stranger or a loved one. We've just examined the ethics of gossip, a conflict about our loyalty to a person who is not present. Now, let's explore a far more urgent dilemma, where loyalties collide in a moment of crisis. Imagine you are driving your own child to the hospital. They have a high fever and are in significant distress. You are worried, and time feels precious. As you take a shortcut down a quiet road, you come across the scene of a terrible car accident that has just occurred. A single car is overturned, and the driver, a complete stranger, is clearly seriously injured and calling for help. You are the first person on the scene. Your phone has no signal. You are now at a terrifying fork in the road. One path is the duty to your own child. Your parental instinct, perhaps the most powerful instinct of all, is screaming at you to continue on your way. Your primary responsibility is to your child's well-being. The stranger's fate is a tragedy, but it is not your responsibility. Helping them will consume precious time that your own child may need. The other path is the duty to a fellow human being. The stranger is in immediate, life-threatening danger. Your child, while sick, is currently stable. The ethical principle of impartiality would argue that all lives have equal value, and you should act to save the one in the most immediate peril. To ignore the stranger's plea is to place a higher value on your child's life simply because they are yours. This is a brutal calculation of the heart. Do you honor the special, sacred bond you have with your loved one, or do you adhere to a universal code of compassion that treats every human life as equally worthy of saving? It is a choice between the powerful, focused love for our own and the broad, impartial empathy for all. The decision you make in that moment reveals where you believe the boundary of your moral responsibility lies, and it forces us to consider how we respond to harm, both the harm we might prevent and the harm that has already been done. The architect of forgiveness, a bridge to heal or a door to more pain. Our last dilemma placed us in the position of preventing a future harm. Now we must turn to the past and confront a harm that has already been inflicted. Imagine someone you trusted deeply has wronged you in a profound way. They betrayed your confidence, caused you financial ruin, or shattered your heart. The pain has lingered for years, a heavy weight you carry every day. Now, after a long period of silence, this person returns. They are visibly changed, filled with what appears to be genuine remorse. They offer a heartfelt apology, take full responsibility for their actions without excuses, and humbly ask for your forgiveness. In this moment, you become the architect of what happens next. The path of forgiveness offers a powerful allure. Forgiveness, many would argue, is not a gift you give to the other person, but a gift you give to yourself. It is the act of letting go of the anger and resentment that has held you captive. It is a choice to release yourself from the prison of the past and to move forward. It can be an act of profound strength and grace, a way of reclaiming your own peace. However, the path of withholding forgiveness also has a strong moral pull. Perhaps the harm they caused was so great that forgiveness feels like an injustice. It might feel like you are minimizing the pain they caused, saying that what they did was somehow acceptable. Withholding forgiveness can feel like an act of self-respect, a refusal to grant absolution for an unforgivable act. It can be a way of honoring your own pain and affirming that some actions have consequences that cannot be simply erased with an apology. The dilemma is this: is forgiveness a moral duty we owe to ourselves to heal, or is it a choice that must be earned by the wrongdoer and can be rightfully denied? You are the sole judge. Your decision to build a bridge or to keep the door locked is a testament to your personal definition of justice and healing. This question of how to respond to a past wrong sets the stage for how we evaluate people in the present.
The race and the runner, rewarding the effort or only the victory. We've just considered the aftermath of a moral failure. Now let's look at the pursuit of success and how we measure it. In our society, we are faced with a constant question of what to value most: the hard work someone puts in or the final result they achieve. Imagine you are a manager who must award a single career-changing promotion to one of two employees. The first employee, let's call her Sarah, is a model of hard work. She is the first to arrive, the last to leave. She is meticulous, dedicated, and has showed incredible growth and effort throughout the year. However, due to a sudden and unpredictable shift in the market, her final project, despite her heroic efforts, produced underwhelming results. The second employee, Mark, is effortlessly brilliant. He is naturally gifted, but often seems disengaged and puts in the bare minimum of effort. He coasts on his talent. Yet through a combination of this talent and sheer luck, his project was a spectacular success, bringing in huge profits for the company. The promotion is on the table. Who do you give it to? If you reward Mark, you are sending a clear message that results are all that matter. This is a pragmatic, bottom-line approach that values tangible success. It reinforces a culture of winning, but it also risks demoralizing hardworking employees like Sarah and creating a perception that effort is meaningless if luck isn't on your side. If you reward Sarah, you are championing a culture of effort, resilience, and dedication. You are showing that the company values the process and the character of its employees, not just the random outcomes of fate. But in doing so, you are actively choosing not to reward the more successful project, which could be seen as a poor business decision. This dilemma forces us to decide what we are truly trying to encourage. Is it the noble struggle or the victorious outcome? The sweat on the brow or the trophy in the hand? This choice about how to apply the rules of reward leads us to a larger question about when the rules themselves no longer seem fair. The tilted scales, when the rules don't work for everyone. Our last puzzle involved a manager applying a rule of promotion. But what happens when the rules themselves, though they seem fair on the surface, are the source of the problem? Let us imagine a small town built around a single shared natural resource, a forest that provides wood for everyone to heat their homes. The town's founding rule is simple and ancient. Each household may harvest 1 cartload of wood per week. For centuries, this rule worked perfectly, as everyone had similar small carts. It was a system of perfect equality. But times have changed. One wealthy family, through generations of innovation, now owns a massive, modern logging truck. They still follow the rule, taking only 1 cartload a week. But their single load is now so enormous that it depletes the forest at an alarming rate, leaving very little for the dozens of other families with their traditional handcarts. The system is breaking down. The other families are going cold, but no rule is being broken. The wealthy family is operating within the letter of the law. The dilemma falls to the town council. On one hand, they can uphold the founding rule. It is their tradition, the law that has governed them for generations. To change it will be to penalize a family for their success in innovation, and it would break with their sacred history. On the other hand, they can see that the rule, while applied equally, is now creating a profoundly unequal and unjust outcome. The spirit of the law, to ensure everyone had wood, is being destroyed by its literal interpretation. They could create a new rule, perhaps based on the number of people in a household or limiting the size of a cartload. This would be more equitable, but it would also mean abandoning their history and actively redistributing a resource away from the powerful family. This forces the question: is justice found in the faithful application of a rule
or in the fairness of its outcome. When a system that was designed to be fair begins to create injustice, is it more just to preserve the system or to break it? This tension, where the rules seem to benefit some more than others, often creates the justification for our next dilemma.
The morality of cheating just a little. We've seen how a system's rules can feel tilted and unfair. This feeling can create a powerful rationalization for bending those rules for personal gain. This brings us to the quiet, internal dilemma of the harmless transgression. Imagine you are a student taking a final exam that will determine your entire grade. You see a classmate who you know is struggling, briefly glance at a few notes they have hidden. Later, when you get your own exam back, you notice the professor has made a small error and given you 5 more points than you earned. You are now faced with 2 temptations. Reporting your classmate is the just thing to do. They broke the rules. But you might feel empathy for them, or tell yourself it's none of your business. The more personal dilemma is your own score. The 5 extra points will boost your final grade significantly. The right thing to do, according to the rules, is to report the error to the professor. It is an act of absolute honesty. However, a voice in your head might begin to rationalize. It's the professor's mistake, not mine. The system is so competitive, I need every advantage I can get. It's just 5 points. It doesn't really harm anyone. It's a small act of passive cheating. You are not actively lying. You are simply allowing a mistake to stand because it benefits you. This is the slippery slope of morality. Where do we draw the line? Is there a category of harmless cheating? Each tiny decision to bend the rules, to stay silent, to accept an unearned advantage seems insignificant on its own. But these small, quiet choices accumulate, and they ultimately define our character. They force us to ask whether integrity is an absolute principle or a flexible one that can be bent just a little when it seems convenient. This concludes our second exploration into the ethical conflicts of our daily lives and prepares us to look outward at the dilemmas that challenge society as a whole.
The justification of war. Can killing ever be a moral act? We have just explored the morality of small, personal transgressions. We now confront the largest and most terrible transgression of all, the act of killing, magnified to the scale of nations. War is perhaps the ultimate moral dilemma. At its core is a horrifying paradox. The act of killing another human being, which is considered the most profound moral crime on an individual level, can be transformed into a celebrated act of patriotic duty on a collective one. This leads us to the theory of the just war, a philosophical framework that attempts to distinguish between wars of aggression and wars of necessity. This theory is built on 2 pillars. The first is jus ad bellum, or the right to go to war. It sets a strict criteria. There must be a just cause, such as self-defense against an attack. It must be a last resort after all peaceful options have failed. It must be declared by a proper authority, and there must be a reasonable chance of success to avoid pointless bloodshed. The second pillar is jus in bello, or justice within war. This governs the conduct of the war itself, demanding that armies distinguish between combatants and civilians, and that the force used is proportional to the military objective, avoiding excessive cruelty. Imagine your country is faced with this choice. A neighboring nation led by a brutal dictator has invaded a smaller allied country, committing atrocities against its people. All diplomatic efforts have failed. Your nation has the military power to intervene, to stop the slaughter and liberate the occupied people. According to just war theory, this seems to be a clear-cut case. The cause is just, defending the innocent. It is a last resort. But the moment you declare war, the moral clarity dissolves into a brutal reality. Your soldiers, who are citizens trained to be healers and builders, will be ordered to kill other human beings. Those enemy soldiers are also people, many of them young conscripts with families, who may not believe in their dictator's cause but are forced to fight under penalty of death. Civilian casualties, despite the best intentions, will be inevitable. Homes, schools, and lives will be destroyed in the crossfire. The dilemma is absolute.
To stand by and do nothing is to be a passive accomplice to atrocity, allowing a great evil to fester. To intervene is to actively participate in the act of killing, unleashing a wave of violence and death, even in the service of a greater good. Can the act of killing ever be a moral one? Is it possible to wage a just war, or is all war, regardless of its motivation, a catastrophic moral failure? This question of sanctioned violence for the greater good echoes in our next dilemma, which deals not with physical harm, but with the harm of words.
The unspoken boundary, free speech versus the shield of safety. The dilemma of war forces us to ask when it is right to cause physical harm to protect others. A similar, yet far more complex question arises in our daily lives regarding psychological and social harm. This is the great modern conflict between the right to free speech and the need to protect people from harmful language. In one corner, we have the principle of free speech, often considered the bedrock of a free and open society. This principle argues that all ideas, even those that are offensive, hateful, or wrong, should be allowed to be expressed in the public square. The belief is that the best way to defeat bad ideas is not to censor them, but to confront them with better ideas. Suppressing speech, no matter how distasteful, is a dangerous path. It grants an authority the power to decide what is acceptable to say, a power that could easily be turned against dissenters and minorities. In this view, the right to speak freely is absolute, and the responsibility to deal with offensive words lies with the listener. In the other corner, we have the principle of safety and the protection from harm. This view argues that speech is not just sound, it is an action that can have real-world consequences. Hate speech, targeted harassment, and the promotion of dangerous ideologies do not contribute to a healthy debate. They serve to silence, intimidate, and endanger marginalized communities. This perspective argues that a society has a right and a duty to create a safe environment for all its members, and this may require drawing a line and declaring certain types of speech unacceptable. The harm caused by relentless verbal abuse or incitement to violence is real and tangible, and it should not be tolerated under the banner of absolute freedom. The dilemma is where to draw that line. Who gets to decide what constitutes harmful speech? Is it possible to restrict the worst forms of speech without starting down a slippery slope toward broader censorship? Conversely, is it possible to have a truly free society if its most vulnerable members are constantly under verbal assault? We are forced to choose between an absolute freedom that may permit cruelty and a protected society that may limit expression. This societal struggle to balance rights and protections is at the very heart of our next dilemma.
The price of health, a universal right or a paid privilege. Our debate over free speech centered on whether safety from verbal harm is a right. We now turn to a more fundamental question: is safety from physical illness a right? This is the ethical dilemma of universal health care. Imagine two societies. In the first society, health care is treated as a commodity, a service that can be bought and sold in a marketplace, like a car or a television. Access to doctors, medicine, and life-saving treatments is determined by an individual's ability to pay, either directly or through private insurance. This system is rooted in the principles of individual liberty and personal responsibility. It allows for competition, innovation, and consumer choice. It argues that forcing a taxpayer to pay for another person's health is a form of coercion, and that individuals should be free to make their own choices about their health and their finances. The quality of your health care is a direct result of your own resources and decisions. In the second society, health care is treated as a fundamental human right, a public good that should be available to every citizen regardless of their wealth or social status. This system is typically funded through taxes, and the government ensures that everyone has access to a certain standard of care. This approach is rooted in the principle of social solidarity. It argues that a person's ability to live a healthy life should not depend on their income, and that a just society has a moral obligation to care for its sick and vulnerable.
It views health as a precondition for participating in society and pursuing a meaningful life. The dilemma is a direct clash of these values. Is healthcare a right that society must provide, or is it a privilege that individuals must earn or purchase? The first system offers freedom and choice, but risks leaving the poor and unlucky to suffer without care. The second system offers security and equality, but requires higher taxes and limits individual choice. The question is not just about economics. It is a profound ethical statement about what we owe to one another as members of a society. This idea of collective obligation, of what we owe to the society that supports us, is the focus of our next dilemma.
The invisible contract, the ethics of paying or not paying taxes. We've just asked whether society owes healthcare to its citizens. Now, we flip the question around and ask what citizens owe to their society. This brings us to the quiet, yearly ritual of paying taxes and the ethical dilemma of tax evasion. On the surface, the law is simple. You must pay the taxes you owe. But the morality behind it is far more complex. Consider the perspective of the social contract. This idea suggests that we all implicitly agree to give up a small portion of our individual wealth and freedom in exchange for the benefits of living in a safe, organized, and functioning society. The taxes we pay are our dues for this contract. They fund the roads we drive on, the schools that educate our children, the police who protect us, and the courts that uphold justice. Paying your fair share is a fundamental civic duty, a moral obligation to contribute to the collective good that you benefit from every day. To evade taxes is to be a free rider, to use and enjoy the public services without contributing to their upkeep. It is an act of theft, not from a faceless government, but from every other member of your community who pays their share. However, another perspective sees the situation differently. An individual might feel that the government is corrupt, wasteful, or using their tax money for purposes they find deeply immoral, such as an unjust war or oppressive policies. From this viewpoint, paying taxes is not a contribution to the common good, but a forced complicity in acts of injustice. They might argue that their first moral duty is not to the state, but to their own conscience, and that they have a right to withhold funding from an institution they believe is causing harm. Or, on a simpler level, a person struggling to make ends meet might rationalize that the vast, powerful government will not miss their small contribution, while that same money could mean the difference between security and poverty for their own family. The dilemma forces us to define our relationship with the state. Is paying taxes an absolute moral duty, the lifeblood of a civilized society? Or is it a conditional obligation that depends on the government's own moral behavior and the citizens' individual circumstances? This question of our obligation to a national community leads directly to a global question. What obligation do we have to those who want to join it? The open gate, the moral questions of borders and immigration. Our last dilemma concerned our financial duty to the nation we are a part of. We now consider our moral duty to those who are not a part of it, but wish to be. This is the intensely emotional and complex dilemma of immigration and the idea of justice at a nation's border. Let us imagine the world from two different ethical standpoints. First, from a cosmopolitan or utilitarian perspective. This view argues that from a moral standpoint, borders are arbitrary lines on a map. A person's life prospects should not be determined by the accident of where they were born. All human beings have an equal right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And if that pursuit requires them to move to another country to escape poverty, violence, or persecution, they should be allowed to do so. In this view, a just world would have open borders, allowing the free movement of people to where they can be safest and most productive. Restricting immigration is seen as an unjust act of gatekeeping, where the lucky residents of wealthy countries hoard resources and opportunities, denying them to those in desperate need. Now, let's consider the communitarian or nationalist perspective. This view argues that a nation is like a family or a club, It is a community of people bound by a shared history, culture, and social contract. The members of this community have special obligations to one another that they do not have to outsiders. A just government, in this view, has a primary duty to protect the well-being, economic security, and cultural integrity of its own citizens. While compassion for outsiders is a virtue, it cannot come at the expense of the existing community. This perspective argues that a nation has a right to control its borders, to choose who can join its community, and to limit immigration to ensure that its social services, infrastructure, and labor markets are not overwhelmed. The dilemma is a profound clash between our duty to humanity as a whole and our duty to our own national community. The answer to this question shapes not only our laws, but our very understanding of what a nation is for.
The sound of the whistle, the choice between loyalty and truth. Our last dilemma explored our duty to those outside our national community. Now we turn inward to the dilemma of an individual's duty when they are inside an organization that is doing wrong. This is the lonely and perilous choice of the whistleblower. Imagine you are a mid-level employee at a large corporation, a company you have dedicated years of your life to. You discover undeniable proof that your company is engaged in a massive illegal act that is causing significant public harm. Perhaps they are knowingly polluting a river with toxic chemicals, selling a product they know to be dangerous, or defrauding their customers out of millions of dollars. You are now standing at a crossroads. One path is loyalty. Your company has provided you with a livelihood, a career, and a community. Your colleagues are your friends. The organization is built on a foundation of trust and teamwork. To remain silent is to honor this loyalty. You can tell yourself it's not your responsibility, that you should just keep your head down, do your job, and protect your own career and the jobs of your coworkers. To speak out would be an act of betrayal against the institution that feeds you. The other path is a higher loyalty, a loyalty to the public good and to the truth. Your conscience tells you that the harm being done is a grave injustice. You have the power to stop it, but only by going public, by blowing the whistle. This act will make you a hero to the public, but it will make you a traitor to your organization. You will almost certainly be fired, ostracized by your former colleagues, and you may face expensive lawsuits from the powerful corporation you exposed. Whistleblowers are often celebrated in hindsight, but in the moment, they face immense personal and professional destruction. The dilemma forces a choice between two powerful loyalties, the loyalty to the people you know and work with, and the loyalty to the faceless public you have a duty to protect. Is your primary moral obligation to the community you are a part of, or to the universal principles of justice and truth? This question of what a just system owes its people is reflected directly in our next dilemma.
The unlevel playing field, justice in education. The whistleblower's dilemma is often about ensuring a fair and safe outcome for the public. This raises a foundational question. How does a society create fair outcomes in the first place? Many believe the answer begins with education, which leads us to the dilemma of equal access versus merit. Let's picture two competing philosophies for a just educational system. The first philosophy is based on equal opportunity. It argues that every child, regardless of their family's wealth, race, or neighborhood, should have access to the exact same quality of resources, well-funded schools, excellent teachers, and a safe learning environment. The starting line of the race should be the same for everyone. This seems inherently fair. However, in a world where vast inequalities already exist, this approach can fall short. A child coming from a stable, wealthy home with access to tutors and books has a massive advantage over a child from a poor, unstable home, even if they attend the same school. This leads to the second philosophy, which is based on meritocracy combined with equity. This system also values fairness, but it defines fairness as giving each student what they need to succeed. It might involve providing significantly more funding and support to schools in disadvantaged areas, or implementing affirmative action policies in university admissions.
These policies give preferential treatment to students from historically marginalized groups in an attempt to compensate for systemic disadvantages and create a more diverse student body. Herein lies the dilemma. Critics of equity-based policies argue that they are a form of reverse discrimination, penalizing individuals based on their background rather than their individual merit and hard work. They believe the most qualified candidate should win the best educational spots, regardless of their life circumstances. Proponents of these policies argue that a true meritocracy is impossible on an unlevel playing field. They contend that these measures are a necessary corrective to deep-seated historical and social inequalities, and that a diverse student body enriches the educational experience for everyone. The question is profound. Does justice in education mean treating everyone the same, or does it mean actively working to correct the imbalances of society? The choice we make shapes not just our schools, but the very future of our society. This tension between the needs of the individual and the needs of society as a whole is magnified in our next dilemma.
The watchful eye, the needs of a nation versus the rights of an individual. We have just explored the tension between individual merit and collective fairness in education. This same tension exists in the realm of national security, where the collective need for safety clashes directly with the individual's right to be left alone. Let us revisit the theme of privacy versus safety, but this time with even higher stakes. Imagine a credible intelligence report indicates that a major terrorist attack is imminent in a large city. The authorities have identified a suspect, but they don't know the exact location or time of the planned attack. They have a choice. They can follow the standard, slow-moving legal process of obtaining warrants to search the suspect's property and monitor their communications. This process respects the suspect's constitutional rights, the right to privacy and the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. It upholds the principle that the government's power must be checked and limited to prevent abuse. However, this process takes time, and every hour that passes could be the one in which the attack occurs, potentially costing hundreds of innocent lives. The alternative is to take extraordinary measures. The government could use its power to bypass these legal protections in the name of an emergency. They could conduct a warrantless search, engage in widespread surveillance of the suspect's associates, and detain and interrogate people without legal counsel. This path prioritizes the safety of the many over the rights of the few. It operates on the utilitarian principle that the greater good of saving lives justifies the temporary suspension of individual liberties. The dilemma is stark. Do we uphold the letter of the law and the rights of the individual, even if it means running the catastrophic risk of a terrorist attack? Or do we compromise our most cherished legal principles in the face of a clear and present danger to public safety? If we choose safety, we risk creating a precedent for the erosion of civil liberties, a state where rights can be cast aside whenever the government declares an emergency. If we choose liberty, we risk failing in our most basic duty to protect innocent lives. This question of whether true justice can exist if our rights are not equally applied leads us to our next fundamental puzzle.
The pursuit of balance is justice possible without true equality? Our last two dilemmas have orbited a central burning question about the relationship between justice and equality. Let us now confront it directly. Is it possible for a society to be truly just if it is not also truly equal? To explore this, we must first distinguish between different kinds of equality. There is equality before the law, the principle that everyone, from the poorest citizen to the most powerful leader, is subject to the same legal rules and standards. There is equality of opportunity, the idea that everyone should have the same chance to succeed in life, regardless of who their parents are. And then there is equality of outcome, the far more radical idea that a just society would be one in which the disparities in wealth, health, and well-being between its members are minimal. Now,
Imagine a society that has achieved perfect equality before the law and equality of opportunity. The rules are fair, the starting line is the same for everyone. However, due to differences in talent, effort, and simple luck, massive inequalities of outcome have emerged. A small number of people are fantastically wealthy, while many others live in poverty. Is this society just? One school of thought, often associated with libertarianism, would say yes. If the rules of the game are fair, then any outcome, no matter how unequal, is by definition just. To interfere with this outcome, for example, by heavily taxing the rich to support the poor, would be an injustice, a violation of the winner's right to their rightfully earned property. Another school of thought, associated with egalitarianism, would say no. A society with such vast disparities cannot be called just regardless of how fair its rules are. Extreme inequality of outcome inevitably corrupts the other forms of equality. The wealthy can afford better lawyers, effectively creating a different legal system for themselves. Their wealth gives their children advantages that make a mockery of true equality of opportunity. In this view, a just society must be concerned not only with fair rules, but with the fairness of the final score. The dilemma is fundamental. Is justice merely the process of playing by fair rules, or is it also measured by the equality of the final result? The path a society chooses defines its very soul. This question of fairness and outcomes naturally leads us to a deeply personal and societal dilemma.
The second chapter, Who Truly Deserves a Second Chance? We have pondered the structure of a just society. Now we must ask one of the most difficult questions within it. What does that society do with those who have broken its most serious rules? This is the dilemma of the second chance. Imagine two individuals who have committed the same serious crime and have both served their full prison sentences. The first individual, upon release, demonstrates profound remorse. They dedicate their life to community service, speak to young people to steer them away from a life of crime, and do everything in their power to atone for the harm they caused. The second individual serves their time, but upon release, shows no remorse. They make excuses for their actions, express bitterness about their punishment, and seem to have learned nothing from the experience. The question now falls to society. Who deserves a second chance? The concept of justice demands that once a debt to society has been paid, it is paid. Both individuals have completed their legal punishment. Should they not both be afforded the same rights and opportunities? The right to vote, to find a job, to be a full member of the community again? This perspective argues that a true second chance cannot be conditional on our judgment of their internal state of remorse. It must be an automatic part of a just system that believes in redemption. However, our human intuition and our concern for public safety tell a different story. We may feel that the first individual has truly earned a second chance, while granting one to the second individual feels naive and dangerous. We might believe that a second chance is not a right, but something that must be earned through demonstrated change and atonement. This dilemma pits the cold, impartial principle of legal justice against the emotional, discerning reality of human trust. Does everyone who has paid their legal debt automatically deserve a full return to society? Or is it society's right, and perhaps its duty, to judge who is truly worthy of redemption? The answer determines whether our justice system is one of pure punishment or one that holds out the possibility, however difficult, of a second chapter. This concludes the third part of our journey and prepares us for the unique ethical challenges of our modern age. The ghost in the machine, when AI makes a moral choice. We concluded our last section by questioning who deserves a second chance, a question rooted in human judgment. We now enter a new era, one where we must confront decisions made not by humans, but by the complex algorithms we have created. This is the dilemma of the ghost in the machine. artificial intelligence making a moral choice. Picture a self-driving car carrying you down a narrow mountain road. Suddenly, a group of schoolchildren step out from behind a bend directly into the car's path. The car's sensors detect the impending collision, and its processor calculates, in a fraction of a second, that it has only two options. Option 1 is to continue straight, hitting the group of children. Option 2 is to swerve off the road, sending the car and you, its sole occupant, plunging over the cliff. The car cannot hesitate. It must execute the decision its programmers gave it. And in that fact lies the dilemma. How should that car be programmed? A utilitarian programmer might code the car to always choose the action that minimizes the loss of life. In this case, it would sacrifice you, the one passenger, to save the many children. A different programmer, perhaps working for the car manufacturer, might code the car to prioritize the safety of its owner at all costs. In that case, the car would continue straight. A third programmer might try to encode legal liability, programming the car to stay its course and break no traffic laws, treating the children stepping onto the road as the initiating factor of the accident. Unlike a human driver, who would make a panicked, instinctual decision, the AI's choice is premeditated, a piece of cold, ethical logic written in code months or years earlier. This forces us to ask the ultimate question of responsibility. When the inevitable crash happens, who is morally culpable? Is it the programmers who wrote the ethical subroutine? Is it the car's owner, who implicitly agreed to its programming when they purchased it? Or is it the company that designed and sold a machine tasked with making a choice between life and death? We have created a new kind of intelligence, but we have not yet figured out how to give it a soul or who to blame when its logic leads to tragedy. This problem of making a programmed choice for an immediate future leads us to a far grander dilemma about the choices we are making for a much more distant one. The long shadow, our climate responsibility to the future. The artificial intelligence in our last dilemma was forced to make a life or death decision based on immediate, predictable outcomes. We as a global society face a similar dilemma on a planetary scale, but our choices are slower, and the victims are the generations who have not yet been born. This is the dilemma of our climate responsibility. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that our collective actions, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, are fundamentally altering the Earth's climate in ways that will lead to catastrophic consequences for future generations: rising sea levels, extreme weather events, food and water shortages. We are living in a moment of unprecedented awareness. We know the harm we are causing. On one side of the dilemma is the argument for immediate radical action. This is a profound moral position that views the future of humanity as a sacred trust. It argues that we are the temporary stewards of the planet and that to knowingly continue on a path of destruction is an act of unimaginable selfishness and intergenerational injustice. From this perspective, future generations are a voiceless, powerless population, and we have an absolute moral duty to protect their right to a habitable planet, even if it requires significant sacrifice and economic hardship for us in the present. On the other side is the argument of present-day justice and pragmatism. This view does not necessarily deny climate change, but it highlights the severe, immediate costs of radical action. Rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuels could devastate economies, eliminate millions of jobs, and plunge vast populations back into poverty. For developing nations, affordable energy is the primary engine for lifting their citizens out of hardship. This perspective asks, is it just to demand that the poorest people on Earth today sacrifice their chance at a better life for the benefit of a wealthier but distant future generation? This creates a painful ethical calculation. How do we balance the concrete, immediate suffering of people alive right now against the projected, abstract suffering of people who do not yet exist?
The choices we make cast a long shadow, forcing us to decide whether our primary moral obligation is to the living or to the unborn. This dilemma of our responsibility for the future of the species is mirrored in our growing power to rewrite its very code.
The blueprints of life. The rights and wrong of genetic engineering. We have just grappled with our responsibility for the external environment of future generations. We now turn to a technology that gives us power over their internal environment, their very genetic makeup. This is the dilemma of editing the blueprint of life. With revolutionary technologies like CRISPR, we stand on the threshold of being able to alter human DNA with incredible precision. This power presents us with a spectrum of choices and a moral line that is becoming increasingly blurred. At one end of this spectrum is therapy. We have the potential to edit the genes of an embryo to eliminate devastating hereditary diseases. Illnesses like Huntington's, cystic fibrosis, or sickle cell anemia. The argument for this is one of pure compassion. To possess the ability to prevent a lifetime of suffering for a child and choose not to use it could be seen as a profound moral failure. This is medicine at its most proactive, stopping a tragedy before it ever has a chance to begin. But this path leads us onto a slippery slope. And at the other end of the spectrum is enhancement. Once we master the tools to fix a broken gene, what stops us from improving a normal one? What if wealthy parents could pay to ensure their children are born with genes linked to higher intelligence, greater athletic ability, or a specific physical appearance? This possibility raises the terrifying specter of a new, biologically entrenched class system. A world where the rich are not just wealthier, but are literally better, stronger, smarter, and healthier from birth. This could create a genetic divide that would make our current social inequalities seem trivial, a society of genetically enhanced haves and natural have-nots. The dilemma lies in finding the line, if one even exists. Is there a morally significant difference between preventing a disease and enhancing an ability? If we open the door to this technology for the compassionate purpose of healing, can we ever hope to close it to the eugenic temptation of enhancement? Who gets to decide what constitutes a disorder to be fixed versus a mere human imperfection to be accepted? Our power to rewrite the code of life forces us to confront what we truly value about being human. This power to see into our biological code is matched only by the growing power to see into our digital lives.
The digital footprint, surveillance, and the price of freedom. Our ability to alter the human blueprint raises questions of control and inequality. A parallel dilemma is emerging from our ability to track and analyze the digital blueprint of every person's life. We have previously discussed government surveillance for national security, but a more pervasive form of monitoring now comes from the private corporations that govern our digital world. Every time you search, click, like, buy, or travel somewhere with your phone in your pocket, you leave a digital footprint. This data is the oil of the modern economy, collected by corporations to build an astonishingly detailed profile of who you are, your habits, your desires, your fears, your political beliefs. The argument in favor of this system is one of convenience and consent. In exchange for our data, we receive incredible services for free. Search engines, social media platforms, navigation tools. The system learns what we like and provides a personalized, streamlined experience. We are shown more relevant ads, recommended content we are likely to enjoy, and we consent to this every time we click Agree on the terms of service. It is a voluntary, contractual exchange that powers much of the modern internet. The argument against this system is that it represents a new and insidious form of control. This constant passive surveillance creates a power imbalance of historic proportions.
Corporations possess a godlike view of our lives, and this knowledge can be used not just to serve us better, but to manipulate us more effectively. It can shape our purchasing decisions, influence our emotions, and even impact the democratic process in ways we're not consciously aware of. Privacy, in this view, is not about having secrets to hide. It is about the freedom to be an authentic individual, to explore ideas without being constantly monitored, profiled, and subtly steered. The dilemma is whether the undeniable convenience of this personalized world is worth the price of our autonomy. Are we willingly participating in the construction of a gilded cage, trading our personal freedom for a better user experience? This question of power, wielded by wealthy corporations in the digital sphere, reflects a much older question about the power of wealth in the halls of justice.
The gilded cage. Should justice be blind to wealth? The power of tech corporations to shape our digital lives highlights a fundamental truth. Wealth creates power. This leads us to question one of the most sacred ideals of a just society, that justice should be blind. We envision Lady Justice wearing a blindfold, meaning that the law should apply equally to all, regardless of their wealth, power, or social status. This is the ideal we aspire to. The reality, however, presents a stark and uncomfortable dilemma. Imagine two individuals are charged with the same serious crime. The first is an average citizen with limited funds. They must rely on a court-appointed public defender who is juggling hundreds of other cases. They lack the resources for private investigators or expert witnesses, and the immense financial pressure may force them to accept a plea bargain for a crime they did not commit, simply to avoid the risk and expense of a trial. The second individual is a billionaire. They can afford to hire a legal dream team, the most skilled and expensive lawyers in the nation. This team can dedicate unlimited resources and thousands of hours to scrutinizing every piece of evidence, filing endless motions, hiring their own experts, and overwhelming the prosecution with legal maneuvers. While both individuals are subject to the very same laws on paper, their experience of the justice system is entirely different. The core of the dilemma is this: can justice truly be blind when wealth can purchase a significantly higher quality of legal defense? Does this disparity mean that we operate a two-tiered system of justice, one for the rich and another for everyone else? If access to a fair outcome is so heavily influenced by financial resources, it challenges the very definition of a just society. It forces us to ask whether the blindfold on Lady Justice is a noble aspiration we must constantly fight for, or a naive myth that conceals a system where justice, like so many other things, is ultimately available to the highest bidder. The morality of eating animals. Our last dilemma forced us to question if justice is applied equally regardless of wealth. We now ask a similar question about a much wider gap in power, whether the concept of justice applies at all across the boundary of species. This is the dilemma present in our daily meals, the morality of eating animals. For most of human history, this was not a dilemma but a necessity. Today, for many, it is a choice, and one that rests on two profoundly different ethical frameworks. One framework is rooted in human-centric tradition and nature. It argues that humans are part of a natural food chain, and consuming animals for sustenance is a normal biological process. This view holds that there is a fundamental moral distinction between human life and animal life. While we should not inflict unnecessary cruelty, the lives of animals do not carry the same moral weight as the lives of humans, who possess reason, complex language, and the capacity for self-reflection. In this view, raising animals for food, if done humanely, is an ethically acceptable practice that has been part of our culture for millennia. The opposing framework, however,
argues that the key moral question is not about intelligence or reason, but about sentience, the capacity to feel pain and to suffer. From this perspective, a creature's interest in avoiding suffering is a profound moral claim, regardless of its species. This view shines a harsh light on the realities of modern factory farming, where billions of sentient creatures are often subjected to immense suffering for the sake of efficiency and profit. To knowingly cause this suffering for something that is, for many of us, merely a dietary preference is seen as a profound moral failing, an act of speciesism where we prioritize the trivial interests of our own species over the vital interests of others. The dilemma is served on our plates every day. Do we accept our traditional place at the top of the food chain? Or do we extend our circle of moral concern to include the sentient beings we share the planet with? This very debate, which has intensified in recent years, now takes place in a new and powerful public arena.
Justice in the age of social media. We've just explored a profound moral debate about our food. Now we turn our attention to the new global stage where all such debates are held. The chaotic, powerful, and often brutal court of public opinion known as social media. Before the digital age, for an ordinary person to be judged, they would have to be involved in the legal system. Today, anyone with a smartphone can find themselves on trial. This has created a new and controversial form of justice. On one hand, social media has acted as a powerful democratizing force for accountability. It gives a megaphone to the voiceless, allowing ordinary people to expose wrongdoing and call out injustice in ways that were once impossible. It can hold powerful individuals, corporations, and institutions accountable when traditional systems fail. A video of a public injustice can go viral in minutes, forcing a response and creating real-world change. This is the argument for social media as a tool for collective justice, a digital town square where the community can enforce its own moral norms. On the other hand, this new court operates without any of the safeguards of a traditional legal system. There is no due process, no presumption of innocence, no impartial judge. Nuance and context are often the first casualties in the viral spread of outrage. An accusation, whether true, false, or merely misunderstood, can circle the globe in hours, and the resulting judgment can be swift and merciless. The punishment, permanent public shaming, the loss of a job, complete social ostracization, can be wildly disproportionate to the alleged offense. The dilemma is clear. Is this new digital justice a vital tool for holding the powerful to account? Or is it a high-tech mob that trades in outrage and destroys lives without a fair trial? We have created a system that can deliver a verdict in an instant, but we have not yet decided if that verdict is truly just. This powerful system has a name for its most severe sentence.
The ethics of cancel culture. Our last dilemma examined the broad phenomenon of justice on social media. We now focus on its most potent and controversial expression, the practice that has come to be known as cancel culture. The very term is a battleground, and its definition depends on your perspective. From one point of view, cancel culture is simply a new name for accountability. It is a way for the public, particularly marginalized communities who have historically been silenced, to collectively withdraw their support from public figures who say or do harmful things. It is seen as a long overdue social corrective, where people are finally facing consequences for racism, sexism, or other forms of prejudice. In this view, it is not censorship, but a consequence of free speech. If a person has the right to say something offensive, the public has an equal right to respond by refusing to buy their products, watch their movies, or listen to their ideas. It is the free market of social consequence in action. From the opposing point of view, cancel culture is a dangerous form of modern-day Puritanism, a punitive mob that seeks not just to criticize, but to deplatform, demonetize, and socially erase individuals. This perspective argues that it creates a climate of intense fear, where people are afraid to ask questions, make mistakes, or express nuanced opinions lest they be targeted for total condemnation. It is seen as deeply unforgiving, often lacking a path for apology or redemption, and quick to judge past actions by the evolving standards of the present. The dilemma is whether this is a tool for progress
or a weapon of intolerance? Is it a way to create a more just and inclusive society by setting clear moral boundaries? Or does it stifle open debate, encourage ideological conformity, and replace the possibility of forgiveness with the permanence of digital exile? The battle over cancel culture is, at its heart, a battle over the rules of our tribe, which begs an even bigger question.
Is it just to prioritize humans over animals? We have just debated the moral rules within our human community. Now we zoom out to ask about our community's place in the wider world, revisiting our earlier dilemma about animal ethics from a more fundamental perspective. Is the very act of placing humans at the center of our moral universe a form of prejudice? This is the dilemma of human priority, often framed around the concept of speciesism. Imagine a burning building. You have just enough time to run in and save one being. In one room is a human stranger. In another room is your beloved family dog, a creature you have loved for years. Most people feel a powerful, almost instantaneous instinct to save the human. The philosophy of anthropocentrism, or human-centeredness, would argue that this instinct is morally correct. It holds that humans are exceptional. Our capacity for complex reason, art, culture, and moral self-reflection grants us a unique and superior moral status. Our primary duties are to our own kind, and while we should be kind to animals, human life and human interests should always take priority in any direct conflict. The opposing view, however, challenges this instinct. It argues that this is speciesism, a prejudice in favor of our own species that is as logically flawed as racism or sexism. This perspective, championed by philosophers like Peter Singer, suggests that the morally relevant characteristic is not intelligence or species, but sentience, the ability to suffer. Because both a human and a dog can experience terror and pain, their interest in avoiding that suffering deserves equal consideration. To prioritize the human simply because they are human is a bias, not a reasoned moral principle. This dilemma forces us to confront the very foundation of our ethical system. Is our instinct to prioritize humanity a justifiable moral truth, or is it a deeply ingrained prejudice that we should strive to overcome? Our answer determines whether we see ourselves as the masters of the natural world or simply as one sentient species among many. This question of our place in the world is becoming more complex as our technology blurs the lines between our homes and the outside world.
The dilemma of privacy in smart devices. Our last dilemma was a grand philosophical question about our place in nature. We now come crashing back into the most intimate of modern spaces, our own homes, which are increasingly filled with devices that are listening. This is the dilemma of our smart speakers, cameras, and appliances. On the surface, these devices represent the pinnacle of convenience. Your smart speaker can play any song you desire, answer any question, and control your lights with a simple voice command. Your smart doorbell allows you to see who is at your door from anywhere in the world. These technologies are designed to make our lives easier, safer, and more efficient. They learn our habits and anticipate our needs. We invite them into our homes, and in theory, we consent to their function every time we use them. We are trading a small amount of data for an immense amount of utility. But beneath this surface of convenience lies a profound ethical problem. These devices are, by their very nature, instruments of surveillance. They are always-on microphones and cameras placed by a corporation into our most private and sacred spaces, our living rooms, our kitchens, even our bedrooms. They collect vast amounts of ambient data, not just on the commands we give, but on the patterns of our lives, when we are home, what we talk about, who we are with. This creates a permanent, searchable record of our private existence, a record that can be used by companies for marketing, be demanded by governments, or be targeted by hackers. The dilemma is a quiet but crucial one. In our quest for a more convenient and connected life, are we slowly dismantling the very concept of a private sphere?
We are normalizing a level of intimate surveillance that would have been considered the stuff of dystopian fiction just a generation ago. Is the convenience offered by our smart devices worth the price of having a corporate informant silently listening in the corner of the room?
Moral relativism versus universal justice. We've spent our journey exploring dilemmas in our lives and in our times. We now arrive at the final part of our exploration, confronting the timeless philosophical puzzles that underpin all of them. Our first stop is perhaps the most fundamental question of all. We've asked how morality changes across cultures, but now we ask, is there any true, objective morality at all? This is the ultimate battle between moral relativism and universal justice. On one side stands moral relativism. This is the idea that there are no absolute, universal moral truths that apply to everyone, everywhere. Instead, it argues that what is right and wrong is entirely relative to a particular culture, society, or even an individual. For the relativist, to claim that your moral code is superior to another's is an act of arrogance. Values like honesty, loyalty, and justice are not objective facts about the universe. They are simply social constructs, different sets of rules that different human tribes have invented to help them survive and coexist. From this viewpoint, there is no ultimate high ground from which to judge another's morality. There are only different perspectives, none inherently more valid than the last. On the other side stands moral universalism, also known as moral objectivism. This philosophy argues that, despite cultural differences, there are certain fundamental moral principles that are universally true. These are not mere social conventions, but are truths grounded in reason, in the shared nature of human flourishing, or in a higher authority. A universalist might argue that the principle causing needless suffering is wrong is a truth that is just as real as the mathematical truth that 2 + 2 = 4. It is a principle that holds true whether a culture acknowledges it or not. The Holocaust, from this perspective, was not just wrong according to the values of the Allies, it was objectively, universally, and absolutely wrong. The dilemma is profound. If we accept relativism, we may become more tolerant of cultural differences, but we lose the ability to condemn acts of profound evil and injustice. If we accept universalism, we gain a firm foundation for justice and human rights, but we risk becoming dogmatic and intolerant of those who hold different values. We are forced to decide whether the moral laws we live by are written in the stars or are simply written in the sand. This question of whether to obey a law we feel is wrong leads directly to our next puzzle.
Can an unjust law be obeyed? We've just questioned whether a universal moral law exists. Now, let's bring that question down to earth. What is our duty as a citizen when the written law of our society directly conflicts with our personal sense of what is right? Can an unjust law be obeyed? One powerful argument, stretching from the philosopher Socrates to modern legal theorists, is that we have a moral duty to obey the law, even a law we believe is unjust. This argument is based on the idea of a social contract. We consent to live under a system of laws, and in return, we receive the benefits of a stable and orderly society. To pick and choose which laws to follow based on our personal feelings is to undermine the entire system. If everyone did this, society would descend into chaos. The proper way to fight an unjust law, in this view, is through the legal and political process, by voting, protesting, and working to change it from within the system, not by breaking it. To accept the benefits of society while refusing its burdens is a form of hypocrisy. The opposing argument, championed by figures like Henry David Thoreau and Martin Luther King Jr., is the principle of civil disobedience. This view holds that there is a higher moral law than the law of the state, and that our conscience has a greater claim on our allegiance. When a law is fundamentally unjust, when it violates human dignity or perpetuates oppression,
we not only have a right to disobey it, but a moral duty to do so. To obey an unjust law is to become complicit in its injustice. Civil disobedience, in this view, is not an act of anarchy, it is an act of profound respect for the true meaning of justice. It is a public, nonviolent, and conscientious breach of the law undertaken with the goal of awakening the conscience of the community. The dilemma is a conflict between order and conscience. Is our primary duty to the stability of the system or to the righteousness of our unmoral convictions? This question of where our laws and morals come from in the first place is our next great puzzle.
The origin of order. Is justice a human invention or a natural law? We've debated our duty to obey the law, but this raises a deeper question. Where does the very concept of justice come from? Is it something we discovered or something we invented? This is the dilemma of the origin of order. One perspective argues that justice is a natural law. This idea, which dates back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, posits that there is an inherent moral order to the universe. Just as there are physical laws like gravity that govern the cosmos, there are also universal moral laws that govern human conduct. These laws are not created by governments or cultures. They are discovered through reason and observation of human nature. In this view, concepts like fairness, reciprocity, and the inherent rights of an individual are timeless truths. Our human laws are just only to the extent that they align with this higher, natural law. Justice, in this sense, is an objective feature of reality that we are all striving to understand and implement. The other perspective argues that justice is a human invention, a social construct. This view suggests that in a state of nature, there is no such thing as justice. There is only power and the struggle for survival. Humans, being social and rational creatures, invented the concept of justice as a pragmatic tool. We created rules, rights, and systems of fairness not because they were inherent in the universe, but because they were a brilliant strategy for creating stable, cooperative societies where we could all be better off. Justice, from this perspective, is not discovered, but is built, like a house or a city. It is a set of shared agreements, powerful and essential for our civilization, but ultimately a product of the human mind, not a feature of the cosmos. The dilemma is about the very foundation of our values. Are we trying to align our world with a transcendent universal order? Or are we the sole architects of our own moral universe, responsible for inventing and maintaining the very meaning of fairness? This question of our own role in creating justice leads to a very personal conflict.
The selfish path, when your happiness conflicts with what is just. Our philosophical questions so far have been grand and societal. Now we turn inward to a conflict that everyone faces in their own life. What should you do when the path to your own personal happiness directly conflicts with the path of justice? Imagine you were offered a dream job, the culmination of all your ambitions. It offers immense personal fulfillment, a fantastic salary, and the chance to do work you are passionate about. However, you discover that the company you would be working for engages in deeply unethical practices. Perhaps it exploits its workers in developing countries, or its business model causes significant environmental damage. To take the job is to secure your own happiness and financial security, and that of your family. You could rationalize that your individual role within the massive company will not make a difference, and that if you don't take the job, someone else will. Your personal happiness is tangible, immediate, and profound. The path of justice, however, demands that you refuse the job. It asks you to make a personal sacrifice in order to avoid becoming complicit in a system that causes harm to others. To turn down the offer is an act of integrity, a statement that your principles are not for sale. It aligns your actions with your sense of what is right. But it also means sacrificing your dream, and perhaps condemning yourself and your family to continued financial struggle. The dilemma is a direct collision between self-interest and ethics. Is it our primary duty to pursue our own well-being than happiness, or do we have a higher duty to act justly, even at great personal cost? Plato asked this very question thousands of years ago. Is it better to be an unjust person who is happy and successful, or a just person who is miserable and poor? There is no easy answer, and the choice you make defines the price you put on your own integrity. This idea of sacrifice for a greater principle is the central theme of our next puzzle.
The ultimate sacrifice, the ethics of giving everything for the greater good. Our last dilemma was about sacrificing your happiness for a moral principle. We now escalate that question to its absolute limit, the ethics of sacrificing life itself for the greater good. This is the dilemma at the heart of heroism, martyrdom, and the cold logic of utilitarianism. Let us return to the world of thought experiments. Imagine a situation where a doctor has 5 patients who are all about to die from organ failure. Each needs a different organ to survive. At that moment, a healthy young person walks into the clinic for a routine checkup. The doctor realizes, with a horrifying clarity, that they could secretly harvest the organs from this one healthy person to save the other 5. The logic of the greater good, in its purest, coldest form, suggests this is the correct action. It is a simple, brutal math. 5 lives saved at the cost of 1. This is the ultimate expression of sacrificing an individual for the benefit of the many. Yet, our moral intuition screams that this is a monstrous act. It violates the fundamental principle of individual rights, the idea that a person is not a mere resource to be used, even for a noble cause. This is the central conflict. On one side, we have the powerful, logical appeal of maximizing well-being and saving the most lives possible. This is the greater good. On the other side, we have the sacredness of the individual, the belief that each person has an inherent right to life that cannot be violated regardless of the consequences. This dilemma shows up in less fantastical ways all the time. It is the soldier who throws themselves on a grenade to save their comrades. It is the firefighter who runs into a burning building knowing they may not come out. In these cases, the sacrifice is voluntary, and we call it heroism. But the core question remains, when is it just to sacrifice one for the many? Does the nobility of the greater good have a limit? And who gets to decide when that limit has been reached? The act of sacrificing 1 for 5 is an extreme solution to the problem of inequality, where some have healthy organs and some do not. This leads us to our next, far more common dilemma.
The morality of wealth and extreme inequality. Our last dilemma involved a brutal calculation of lives. We now turn to a calculation that societies make every day, one that deals with the distribution of resources and well-being. This is the timeless dilemma of wealth and extreme inequality. Let us imagine a society not in terms of individuals, but as a single pie. This pie represents all the wealth, resources, and opportunities the society has to offer. The ethical question is, what is the just way to slice this pie? One school of thought, often associated with libertarian and free market principles, argues that the focus should not be on the final size of the slices, but on the fairness of the process of acquiring them. As long as there is no theft or fraud, as long as the rules of the game are fair, any distribution of wealth, no matter how unequal, is just. If one person, through skill, hard work, or even luck, ends up with half the pie while others have only a crumb, that is a perfectly moral outcome. In this view, forced redistribution, like heavy taxation on the wealthy, is a form of theft, a violation of the individual's right to their property. The other school of thought, championed by philosophers like John Rawls, asks us to perform a thought experiment. Imagine you are behind a veil of ignorance. You get to decide how the pie is sliced, but you do not know which slice will be yours. You could be born rich or poor, talented or disabled. From this original position of fairness, Rawls argued, any rational person would choose a system that ensures the well-being of the least fortunate. They would agree to a system of robust social safety nets and a distribution that minimizes the suffering of those at the bottom. This perspective argues that extreme inequality is inherently unjust because it creates a society where the life prospects of an individual are determined by the arbitrary lottery of their birth.
and that a just society has a moral obligation to mitigate this disparity. The dilemma is a fundamental clash of values. Is justice found in the freedom to accumulate as much as you can under fair rules, or is it found in the compassion to ensure that everyone has enough? This question of what is truly required for a just society leads us directly to our next puzzle.
Does justice require punishment? Our entire journey has largely assumed that when a wrong is committed, justice requires some form of consequence, some form of punishment. We debated its purpose, revenge or restoration, but not its necessity. Now, we challenge that fundamental assumption. Is it possible to have justice without punishment? Imagine a society that has evolved beyond the concept of punitive justice. When a person commits a harmful act, the system does not ask, what punishment do they deserve? Instead, it asks, what caused this harm, and what can we do to heal it and prevent it from happening again? The focus shifts entirely from inflicting suffering to promoting understanding, restoration, and reconciliation. A person who steals is not imprisoned, but is brought into a process with the person they stole from to understand the impact of their actions and to agree on a way to repair the harm. A person who commits an act of violence is not locked in a cage, but is entered into an intensive therapeutic program designed to address the root causes of their behavior, be it trauma, mental illness, or desperation. This is a vision of justice as healing. On the other side is the deeply ingrained human intuition that punishment is essential to justice. This view argues that to not punish a wrongdoer is to trivialize the suffering of their victim. Punishment serves as a powerful societal declaration that certain actions are unacceptable. It provides a sense of closure and vindication for the victim and affirms the moral order of the community. It can also act as a deterrent, preventing future harm. From this perspective, a system without punishment is not an evolved form of justice, but a dangerous and naive failure of it, a system that prioritizes the well-being of the perpetrator over the suffering of the victim. The dilemma forces us to ask what we truly seek when we cry for justice. Is it the satisfaction of seeing a wrong met with the consequence, or is it the hope of creating a world where that wrong is less likely to happen again? Can true justice ever be found in the absence of accountability, or is punishment a necessary part of the human moral equation? This brings us to the ultimate distinction. Is it better to be just or to be right? Throughout our journey, we have used the words just and right almost interchangeably. Now, in our final steps, we must pull them apart and examine them one last time. Is it better to be just or to be right? Let us define our terms. To be just is to adhere to the system of laws, rules, and common agreements that govern society. It is about fairness, impartiality, and the consistent application of an agreed-upon code. Justice is external and communal. To be right is to act in accordance with your own internal moral compass, your conscience, and your sense of empathy and compassion. Rightness is internal and personal. We have seen how these two can conflict. Now, we ask which one holds the higher value. Imagine you are a judge presiding over the case of the parent who stole a loaf of bread to feed their starving child. The law is crystal clear. Theft is a crime. To be a just judge, you must follow the law. You must find the parent guilty. This act upholds the integrity of the entire legal system, ensuring that the law is applied equally to all. It is the pillar of a stable, predictable society. However, your heart, your sense of what is right, may tell you that punishing this parent is a cruel and immoral act. To be a right person in this moment might mean finding a creative way to bend the rules, or even to recuse yourself, refusing to be an agent of what you perceive as an injustice, even if it is lawful. This is the dilemma in its purest form. If you choose justice, you serve the system at the potential cost of your own humanity. If you choose rightness, you serve your conscience at the potential cost of societal order. This is not a thought experiment. It is a choice that people in positions of authority face every day. Which is the higher virtue? Is it our unwavering commitment to the fair rules of the game, or our deep, personal commitment to the compassionate voice within. This tension between the cold system and the warm heart leads to our final paradox. The paradox of justice without mercy. We are approaching the very end of our quiet inquiry. We have seen the conflict between justice and rightness, between the system and the soul. This leads us to a final haunting paradox. What becomes of justice when it is completely stripped of the human quality of mercy? Picture a system of justice that is perfect in its logic and consistency. It is run by a flawless artificial intelligence, incapable of bias or error. It applies the law with absolute impartiality to every single case. There are no exceptions, no extenuating circumstances, no room for compassion. A person who breaks the speed limit by 1 mile per hour receives the exact same penalty, whether they are joyriding or rushing a dying child to the hospital. A person who steals a loaf of bread receives the same sentence, whether they are a billionaire doing it for a thrill or a starving mother. This is a system of perfect, unadulterated justice. It is, in theory, the fairest system imaginable. Yet, is it? Such a system would feel not just, but monstrous. It would be a cold, terrifying, and inhuman machine. This reveals a profound paradox. We strive for a justice that is blind and impartial. Yet, if we were to ever fully achieve it, we might create something that offends our deepest sense of what is right. It seems that for justice to be palatable, for it to feel truly just, it must be imperfect. It must be tempered by the uniquely human and inherently inconsistent quality of mercy. Mercy is the act of looking beyond the rule to see the person. It is the choice to grant grace when the system demands condemnation. But mercy, by its very nature, is unjust. It is the deliberate act of not treating everyone the same. The dilemma is that justice, in its purest form, can lead to cruelty, while mercy, which is necessary to prevent that cruelty, is itself a form of injustice. We seem to be trapped between a perfect system that is inhuman and a human system that is imperfect. And that leaves us with only one question remaining.
The final question: can justice and morality ever truly align? We have journeyed through 50 dilemmas, to the grand conflicts of nations and the quiet whispers of the human heart. We have stood at the crossroads of justice and rightness, of the law and the conscience, of the system and the soul. And now we arrive at the end of our path with one final unanswered question hanging in the air. Can these two forces, justice and morality, ever truly align? Can we ever hope to build a system of laws and rules so perfect that it fully captures the compassionate, nuanced, and deeply personal wisdom of our own moral conscience? Or are they destined to forever be in conflict, two powerful but separate forces pulling us in different directions? Perhaps the purpose of our journey is not to find a final answer. Perhaps the goal is not to create a perfect map where all roads lead to the same destination. Perhaps the very essence of being human is to live in the space between these two ideals, constantly navigating the tension, constantly questioning, constantly striving to be both a good citizen and a good person. The dilemmas do not have simple solutions, because life does not have simple solutions. They are not problems to be solved, but landscapes to be explored. And in that exploration, in the quiet contemplation of these impossible choices, we find not answers, but a deeper understanding of ourselves. And perhaps that is enough.